call this meeting to order, and
You're live now.
oh, I'm live now. Okay. 7 o'clock, let's get started. Looks like we will begin with citizen comments on agenda items. I'm not sure, is there anyone scheduled to talk? Thank you. Okay. Wes, do you want to come up? Sure. When you come up, can you please also state your full name and your address?
Excuse me. Name is Wes Highfill, 17106 Campbell Farm. I also own property with my wife at 16901 Hughes Road. And we back up to the Colemans. We back up to each other on their property. I'm here just to make a comment about the special exception that they're seeking to raise cattle. In general, I fully support people doing what they want on the property, and especially in this case. And as long as it isn't a nuisance to neighbors and the problem, then I think that they should be allowed to do this kind of thing. I don't know much about cattle, and having talked to the Colemans just now, it doesn't sound like it's really going to be a problem. This volumes sound very low. The only three areas I could possibly see it being an issue would be containment, noise, and smell. And with a couple of cattle, I really don't see a problem. The only thing I would request from the town is that you just make sure that you have the right to pull it back if it ever did become a problem, which again, I don't really think it would. But that's the only thing I have to say about it. But I fully support them doing this. That's all I have.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Julie, I know that you have put down to speak on this issue, but since it's actually pertaining to you and you're going to come up anyway, I will make sure we get to you in due time. Are there any other citizen comments? No? Any announcements from the town?
I don't believe we have any. Do you have any, Wade?
No, I do not. Not at this time.
All right.
What about, no, Brian's not here. I was going to ask Brian for his announcements. I guess we'll move along to approval of the minutes. Did everyone get a chance to look those over?
Yeah.
Any comments or revisions?
I move that we approve the minutes of January 15th.
I'll second.
I heard you first, so Kevin gets a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. All right, on to new business. Working Trails Group, report from them. Who
So,
will-
I don't know which one of you wants to come up, or both, to just, I'm going to read a little bit about it, and then you guys can add in what we discussed. So I gave them what the trails analysis and the letter, so I don't know how you guys want to engage with that. But yeah. No, sorry, I was not looking at Matt. Yeah. So just, yeah, and then we can sort of go through it as we do. All right. So, you want, I'll go ahead and start. Okay.
Go ahead, would you like to start us?
Yeah. All right. So the Trails Working Group met 4 times this fall to review the trail system initially created by the 1990 master plan. As part of their work, they have proposed changes to the plan and suggested some priorities for the town to consider. These are detailed in the cover letter and trail analysis document in the agenda packet. Also included in the packet are 3 maps. And there is the first map, which is the original plan, more or less. Then the second map is the map that shows the sections that have not been created at this point, and then and the reasons why they have not been. So either they're on private property, or they were under review at that point, and this goes back to a process that the Parks Board went into, which I'll go into in just a little bit. And then the ones that are currently on private property. The third map is what was the result of the working group's conversation about these various trails. So we, as part of it, I was part of the staff with it, along with John and Preston, and then we had 3 members of the Parks Board on it, Brian from this body, and then 3 members of the public. So that's sort of, or 4 members of the public, excuse me. And that's sort of how the working group worked. So part of this discussion was sort of general recommendations that they made, which is found on the letter in page 4 of the packet, which is to implementation of a trail marking system. So there's a couple of places where we have trails that sort of where they are not currently marked where they go through. So like in Stony Springs, there's a couple of places where they aren't labeled as trail entrances. Address safety concerns at trail crossings. So that's related. There's areas where there's not particularly in sort of this area here where you cross the street and there isn't it isn't at a crosswalk. So it's addressing those type of concerns. Promote and educate town residents about the trails and future progress, and then partner with civic groups to assist in trail maintenance. So part of the idea there was to sort of support creating a ongoing group that would help. Already Sustainable Poolesville does things like Pick It Up Poolesville to help clean areas like parks and such. So expanding that type of program to look at the maintenance of the trails. And then the other part of this process was sort of the detailed going through each of the different proposed trails, why they, what they thought met with sort of the general discussion that they had. So they didn't set out with exact criteria, but more sort of looking at where there are linkages. So one of the things that the Trails Group prioritized was linkages to the current trail system. So like Trail 1 is connecting this sort of trail to Plant Road to the rest of the sidewalk system that you can see in on the map. And then a lot of focus was spent on this area where Bud Road is and where all of that connects with the existing trail system and where there might be opportunities for new trails. So specifically around the pond that is next to the middle school pond. And so that's where the Trails Group went out there. And then, and we can talk about more about all of those, the particulars of it. And then the other part was looking at confirming some already priority work that we're doing on West Willard. The town is already in the spring going to install a new sidewalk on West Willard on one side of the road, and then on sort of the west side of the road, on the east side of the road is where it would connect with the trail system. So things like that. And then the other part of the discussion was how to connect this sort of the northern part of town more to the south. So whether going by Cattail or going through land that the town already owns, which is that sort of Trail 8 and so forth. So we can go through each one if there are specific things, but I just want to give an overall summary, and if you guys have anything you wanted to add.
Yeah.
Just that.
Can you, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Can you introduce yourselves so we know who?
Dr. Jennifer Maroney, I'm Kevin's wife. I think we really tried to find some of the low-hanging fruit that were, out there in the town, so we could sort of build small pieces that would connect to the larger system. And I think we were thinking broadly about where trails, could be really heavily utilized. That factored into our conversation. The one that we're talking about over by the middle school would be a really new trail, but it's actually a really beautiful area, and we connect and draw together the middle school and build on the cross-country activities that the middle school that take place over there. And other than that, it was I think a lot of prioritization you'll see in the packet too, where we're trying to pick the trails we thought would be the most heavily utilized and the easiest to do. Again, back to the low-hanging fruit. And then some of the harder ones were lower priority, but for something to be considered for the future.
Yeah, hey, I'm Matt Partain, 1989 Bodmer. And I just want to add that even easy is not easy. Like there's still things, a lot of things, even for the easiest of the fruit, that should be prioritized by the town and make the effort to try to make them happen. But they're not. It's not like you just say, okay, let's do it, and it happens. There's a lot of steps. They need to go involved in it. But it would be great for the town and much needed.
When you guys signed up, You're going to agree to help build the trails, right?
I'd love to.
Bringing the children along.
Where on Bud are we proposing to put a walkway?
So for Bodmer, what part of the discussion was in there was related to the sidewalk that already exists. So here, let's just zoom in. So on Bud, it was utilizing, so a couple of different things. On Bud Road, it's utilizing, there's already easements along Bud Road on the
It'll be on the west side.
west side of the road. And then we also had a discussion about connecting where the current sidewalk sort of ends on Bodmer, and then there's a gap, and then there isn't really access to Helmos. So we were talking about maybe connecting this, this sidewalk with the sidewalk along Hilliard, Hoskinson, excuse me. And so have a connection there to make it more complete to the parks. So that was another thing that we prioritized, was parks. And like Hoeing Park on Bud is another example of looking at the park system and connecting it to the trail system and so on.
And
So will we be looking at connecting that park at least to a sidewalk going over onto Fisher? Because I think
That-
looking on Bud, the biggest
Yes.
problem, I'm not sure we want to encourage any more walking
Yeah.
from that park going to the
Yeah.
right, because there's a lot of businesses, it's already hard,
Yeah,
with them there to see, and with the kids, I know walking, my kids should be able to ride a bike on their own straight up through town. I
Yeah.
don't allow them to, because on that corner,
Yeah.
going either way, on Bud Road, there's no sight vision and no sidewalk.
and that's where we did have a discussion there about how to connect. That's more, it was less a trail particularly there, but more the sidewalk system itself. And that was a discussion that we had during the meetings. I think Matt actually brought that up at one point. So, but I think that's a good point as well.
And the proposed path, if you're looking at that map, even though there are more lines up there, even lines below the screen, would be to take that number 2 down to that number 4, and then that's cutting across the field on an easement.
Doing it that way.
Cutting across Jameson Field?
Yeah,
There's actually a right-of-way that's there that goes across between your lot and the Jameson.
the two lots that are there
It was
on that
originally,
side.
it was part of the subdivision of that lot into 3 lots.
And how big is that easement?
Yeah,
It's,
they filed for it. That was part of the approval of
How
that.
big-
I'm not-
how
I'm not
big-
asking
how big?
a question.
How big?
I don't
Oh,
know how
20,
big the easement is.
I believe it's a 20-foot, but we need
Yeah.
to double check that.
I believe that's what it was too.
I would just like to caution, especially if it's only a 20-foot, we need to keep in mind, again, I live on that road.
Yeah.
I'm scared to death walking down it, but I do walk down with my kids.
Right.
That as it is, people walking down that road, let their dogs go in everywhere, which
Mm-hmm.
way, and cars drive like it's a raceway.
Yeah.
So are you talking about the Jameson property, or are you talking about Bud Road?
Well, Bud Road, but even if there's that easement in the Jameson, so you're saying right along our wood line. And the
Yeah,
Jameson
that's
correct.
Right,
That's
so-
correct.
I
It's-
know exactly where it is, because I actually just walked around a long way, and I was like, oh, it would've been nice to go just cut up along the woods.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, my property is right up along those woods, it's
Yeah.
20-foot easement, there's only a 50-foot easement from my property, the forest line, I believe, to where that easement would be.
Yeah.
So my fear would be, people walking up through those woods or those areas, whether it be
So,
or whatever,
I'm-
could cause.
I'm gonna stop you. I'm gonna pull this meeting back together. Let's take a moment. I think the idea behind these trails is to make it safer for people to connect to the city. So, I think we should proceed. And I would like to know how wide those easements are, because a 20-foot easement is plenty of space for people to utilize that land safely out of the road, and it to make that Bud Road more accessible, because it is part of the town, it is incorporated, and so it should be able to be used by the people of the town. So,
I know across is 20 feet. I know that part is 20 feet. And I can't remember what the width up Bud was of the easements that we already have. But we can confirm those as well from what we have. Some of those might be a little bit narrower, but we'll check that.
Do you guys get as far as like to say like which ones are going to be sidewalk, which ones are going to be like asphalt or like unimproved or whatever?
We did, we had a number, we had that all sort of identified, whether they're rugged trails or sidewalks. It's all-
Yeah, because it looks like for the one in particular, Bud Road would be an actual sidewalk, and the safety advantage to that, I've walked Bud Road myself. I understand that is definitely a dangerous, I think I'm talking, please. That is definitely a dangerous place for people to be using, so I'm happy to see a sidewalk, but I also recognize it's almost a mile long. That's, comes to my next question. Is there budget for this?
So-
Is there funding for this in place, or is there being?
This was sort of the beginning of this process. There are certain things like, for example, the West Willard stuff that is already budgeted, and there's plans to do that. So like so in terms of, and that's why in the analysis, it reflects the fact that that's already something that's going to take place. And then the thought is as future things happen, some of these might be able to be engaged with as part of that process. Another aspect of this is budgeting out in the future, is looking at what these could cost in the future and then having a potential budget for that in the future. That was part of the discussions that the Trails Group had.
But the answer is there's no budget for it right now. There's not even a prioritization schedule in place yet, so
Yeah.
it's something that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Right.
And then, and can you all speak to what there was a proposal that got everybody kind of like, got some landowners like, in a little bit of a huff, like, it was a trail that was going to connect like over by West Willard and kind of wrap around and go end up back by the, elementary school.
You mean on,
It was originally a proposed trail and you had it on your,
Yeah.
but then it
Yeah,
looks like it wasn't
it's-
being recommended.
yeah, it goes back behind this property.
Yeah.
Along this property line here.
Yep.
So part of the, and they can sort of speak to this, but part of the conversation that was had there was partially resident who lived there, resident feedback. Partially, we've looked at it from a cost perspective. There might be questions about the future cost. That's where the thought that the Trails Group had was talking about focusing on things where, like the middle school, and connecting up with that sidewalk that already exists. Sort of encourage that versus, sort of utilizing the facilities that way. That was the way that the group discussed that one versus, because there's a potential, just the survey, or just the study of the trail was $50,000. So there are questions about the cost there.
Yeah.
That was part of the deliberations that they
I mean, the
had.
cost is certainly a factor, but when I was at that meeting, I didn't hear a lot. I heard, people saying that coyotes are gonna take people away, and like you're gonna get shot by hunters, and like, I heard a lot of stuff that was like, maybe, how do you say, NIMBY, like, not in my backyard stuff, but if, if it's financially like just not tenable, that's understandable too, so. I hope we build these, and I hope we build them, I know you can't just, there's not the budget in place to do it all
Yeah.
immediately, but like, I think everyone I've talked to, the idea of more trails and like walking and bike riding and things like that, and then Julie, what you were saying, safety on Bud Road, those are great things.
Oh, that trail would be awesome. I accidentally turned the opposite way while doing a walk the other day, and wrong time of day, 5:30, and almost got ran over coming down. Trying to get back up the opposite way, so. I think it's
So
good. I just didn't.
I have more questions. Did you have any questions, Kevin? I would love to hear your thoughts.
Generally, we'll probably get to this, but I know you're already presented to the Parks Board, and you want to present to the town commissioners. What would be the ask for us?
Well, the main thing that was discussed in the meetings was just to sort of present this idea before it, so that this could be the plan going forward, because the previous plan has been in every master plan since 1990. So the idea was having this be the kind of idea, so that when there are opportunities, budgetary opportunities,
Yeah.
or development opportunities, or whatever, that this would be how,
Package it in.
how the town would look at them and potentially prioritize them.
So the ask then is for buy-in from this commission to say that this is representative of the comprehensive plan's vision.
Correct,
Gotcha.
exactly.
Okay.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm surprised by the cat trail Cattail Trail, number 9. Mm-hmm. I did not realize that that was a possibility. I guess I didn't realize that.
And that's one where it's potentially the, actually, which was said in the analysis, that one is a little bit harder just simply because there isn't really as much connection. So that was one of the discussions, doing 9 potentially down, or 8, which goes through more town-owned property. That property between those two paths that already exist is all owned by the town, and then potentially trying to connect it, to the, to down by the elementary school and all of that, where there might be more opportunities. So, that 9 goes all the way back to 1990. So that was part of the original plan. So part of what the working group had discussed was how to best engage in each of these different plans, because that could be a possibility depending on how things develop, or there might be a way to connect things a little bit differently based on resources that already existed.
Okay. Any, go.
One question. John? Yeah. Between Elgin and the road for the plant.
Between what?
I say Elgin, I meant, sorry. Hertzberger. Sorry.
Yeah.
I know that has been discussed many times over the years about paving that. And was I remember, I'm just trying to remember, was it the swales, the deep swales there that were part of the problem?
That was one of
Or
the
was it
issues
state highway?
that needs to be addressed, but the bigger problem we were informed, and I'm not sure that it was correctly informed, is the property owner at the corner of Plant Road along Fisher, Hertzberger,
Yeah.
at that corner there, was not amenable to having a easement or right-of-way through there. But
The one all the way at the end.
that's correct. And that kind of,
Right, so there is no easement there because of the
that's
age.
correct. It's a prescriptive easement at the present time. So the town would have to get that agreement. Now, we've been also informed since that time that the property owner is amenable to discussing at least.
But there are some very steep slopes on that yard, and there would have to be rails or something placed up because it's so close to the highway there.
Yeah.
Correct. So what we'd probably also have to do, I mean, it would be a retaining wall or a rerouting of the, of that easement, because it goes over to well 7, if you will. So it may shorten, there's a couple different ways of attacking the issue. I'll leave it at that.
But part of it was having these discussions with property owners. That was part of what Preston actually did some conversations. So.
How problematic do you think that one would be with State Highway?
Well, it depends if, and we've gone down this road before too, with where for instance, along when we did basically from the Catholic school up along to Westerly, that section of sidewalk, the town has an easement through there. The right-of-way was never granted to its prescriptive right-of-way there too. But the town got an easement to go ahead and put it there and didn't have to go through, because it was on private property, didn't have to go through the state highway process. It depends on how it all lays out and what you do.
Yeah, that particular area has always been a concern, even outside the context of the trail system, just because those residents there are physically disconnected from the rest of town.
Correct.
As in a few other areas, so I'd always love to see that prioritized, but I know that there are some, I was just trying to remember whether the issue was the swales or the state highway, or what the issue
The
was.
swales is one thing, but there's a couple other things that need to be addressed that need to be. But it's such a short distance.
Yeah, I know, that's the other thing, it's only 800 feet, that's 800 feet all the way down to the.
That was a rough estimation, but it's in that range.
Yeah, it's pretty small. All right, thanks, that was my question on that one.
When you all were doing these trails, was any of this looked at through the lens of the environmental impact? And are there any sensitive areas that these trails go through or wetland areas? And if so, because I know that like, there are trails that go through some sensitive areas. Was the discussion had about how to mitigate any damage? I don't know if this is, who is this best
Yeah.
directed to?
We have talked about
We
this.
have talked about it. We looked at it from several different places until what they call an RIFSD is done of the area that you work in. You won't know for sure what's there, what the impacts would be.
But that's part of why, and you'll
That's the design process that takes place.
But part of what we looked at, and that's we're looking at, like, I think it's Trail 8 there, where it goes, where they're looking at connecting things. We talked about that as potentially being, either a rustic or a primitive trail because of the sensitivities of that area. So looking at various different ideas to address that. So in looking at these areas, the type of trail might be different depending on those type of environmental impacts.
Another section that we was looked at in regards to that was the trail that goes by the middle school pond
Yeah,
because of slope issues and how you're going
yeah.
to accomplish these things.
So there's, for example, next to the pond, there's already a maintenance path that it has been created. So that was looking at things like that is all natural and things like that.
And that one would entail a small bridge
Yeah.
across the creek.
Correct.
We were talking about having maybe the scouts
Yeah.
engage with.
Like that engagement? Do you need a motion?
Yeah, why don't we just do a motion to, if the planning commission has a recommendation on this report, for lack of a
Yeah,
better.
so what would be helpful for, once we take it to the commissioners, because for me to be able to go for grants and things like that for
Yeah.
these trails, that needs to be adopted by the commissioners. So a recommendation from the planning commission for the commissioners to adopt it would be great.
All right, so I make a motion that that the planning commission recommend the approval of the proposed trails to the commissioners. Is that
Yeah, yeah.
Second.
All in favor?
I,
All right. All right. Okay. Moving on to our next item. Thank you so much, Matt, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you,
Jen-
guys.
It's Jennifer, right?
Yes, sir.
For coming and talking to us. Very much appreciate your hard work on the Trails Committee. All right. Next up, we have recommendation on special exception 001-25 to amend special exception 002-14 to allow for the raising of livestock. Colemans are here to discuss. You can come on up. Can the town give us a quick
Yep.
overview of this first?
Certainly. So the applicants, Julie and Jasmine, correct? All right. Coolman are applying to amend this special exception to their property, 16700 Bud Road, to allow for the raising of livestock. The property is zone PTR2+, and livestock raising falls under the definition of animal boarding placed in the zoning ordinance, which is in the special exception use for this zone. This is an amendment to the property's current special exception to ensure all of the compatible use. It's a residential and a business, a landscaping business on the property. Also, they had previously testified that they wouldn't have livestock, so this sort of connects with that previous discussion. Specifically for this type of use, the wellhead protection section of the town code has specific requirements for a special exception. These include provide a description and estimate for the average and maximum number of livestock that will be yarded or housed on the property. Second is provide evidence that the nutrient management plan for animal waste has been completed. And then I'll talk about that more in a second. And then that the submitted plan designates any waste holding facilities or application sites within the wellhead protection district. So staff analysis. The application did not contain an exact number of longhorns that will be kept. Did reference the donation of one, but what the total would be. So that's part of it. Two, the town hydrologist, Kathy Mim, was requested to review the application. She offered the following. Given the distance of about 800 feet from well 8 to the fenced area, in addition to the existing forest buffer between the proposed fenced area and well 9, I think there is a limited risk to water quality impacts at well 9. I suggest limiting the number of animal units to 3 or less, especially since the fenced area looks slightly more than an acre in size. Therefore, staff suggests that the Planning Commission recommend to the Board of Zoning Appeals that it have conditions of the maximum number of longhorns on the property, which is as laid out by Kathy, and that the applicant provide a nutrient management plan consistent with the state of Maryland's nutrient management plan guidelines for the Department of Agriculture. That concludes the staff report, unless you have anything else, Wade. Okay.
Is it possible to recommend this to the BZA, but include a number of cattle?
Yeah, you could provide that.
We typically put lots
Yeah.
of restrictions in,
BZA can.
Yes.
That can be a.
or ignores,
Yep.
which they rarely ever do. And just tell me that they don't have to take our recommendations.
Yeah. But would you guys like to provide testimony then?
Yes, so before we get started, I just want to mention that in addition to Mr. Wes Highfill, who came and spoke on behalf of this issue, we also received letters that are part of our packets.
That was provided by the applicant.
Oh, it was provided by the applicant, okay. We received a letter from Elizabeth Fosheim. Am I saying that right? Is she local?
She's related to the Willard family, but she's no longer local. She has a ranch.
I was just curious. And then also, sorry, all of this, there was a Jade Wiggins provided a letter as well, so I just want to put that in the record. So if you would like to go ahead and give us your presentation.
All right, my name's Julie Coolman. This is my daughter Jasmine Coolman. We're at 16700 Bud Road. I assume we wanted to state that. And I'm going to let her talk, and then I'll answer questions after that.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Jasmine Coolman. I have been showing since 2019. I have went to multiple competitions since then. And how I started in this was in 2019, I went to the Montgomery County Fair and walked into the barn where I saw longhorns. And then I got to talking to Jade Wiggins, and ever since then, she's been teaching me along with a bunch of other youth in NETLA. And I just really wish I could do this.
Well, your cards this year, you got to do what?
Yeah. And this year I got to ride in on a longhorn. And then later on I went to win all steer champion for steer, and which is over there, all age steer champion. And then I'm not used to public speaking.
This is her first public speaking.
You're doing great. You're doing great. Would you like to tell us about what you've brought to show us? Tell us about these things. If you want to get up and that's easier, you can.
Okay. So, this is probably, I got all of yours. I found this one besides this one, but I'm pretty sure I won this one this year at Frederick County with Crossbow, which is the one I rode in on at Montgomery County, which I also won all H2 champion. And first place, this one was mostly cleaning. And awkward one, not actually. And then this one I also won at Frederick County.
Congratulations.
So we equate this to kind of a 4-H project. We not only run a business, but we also homeschool our children. And this is where her interests lied. When I did my original special exception, I had kids, but they were toddlers and they couldn't voice their opinions yet. And I had no idea that my little girl would like things with horns. First it was goats, now it's been longhorns. So here I am today. It is much like 4-H, it's just not as widely supported as 4-H at this point. They are more native to the area actually than the cow we breed now for meat. They're more adapted to this area, so they can eat a wider variety. So when it comes to nutrient management, we're not gonna have to do too much to our ground, actually. We're gonna overseed market grass, and of course, we're gonna provide it some feed. I think it is a little more over an acre. I think we roughed is probably 2 or 3 total that we'd be fencing in, not at all at one time. So that should be taken into consideration when it comes to the 3. I was hoping to put no max than 5, my number 5, and the reason for being is just for rotating. One, the steer she is being donated, of course, would be a pet. This can't be eaten, this can't be slaughtered. If something happens to it, if it gets sick, it goes back to the person who donated it, much like other rescues do. But they're herd animals, so you wouldn't want to keep them alone. How we've determined to figure that out yet, we haven't, because we're waiting to find out what goes on here first. If she continues to show and enjoys it and something she wants to go into adulthood, then it would be beneficial for her to have more than one show steer. With that being said, though, we've supported our local 4-H families for the past 15 years. Actually, one family in general who's raised 5 kids through the program. And buying beef through 4-H at Montgomery County is becoming absurdly expensive. So I figure if she's raising a pet, she could also raise some food. So we would probably plan on one regular beef cow mixed in with the longhorn. And that may switch over. People are raising more longhorn now for meat. They actually are healthier for you. I just bought my first half to try it out. It's great. And maybe that we do that. But my max number, what I was looking at, was around 5, and that was so we could diversify. There's only one other animal that really we could stick with the longhorn that'd be well too, either a goat or a donkey. Something to keep it calm is the whole basis, right? You have something to play with, and that would be if we didn't have success, either getting another longhorn or raising the beef at first. We've got plenty of a support system around us. Again, a lot of the people that are on Bud are farmers. The neighbor across the street is Joe Taylor. She now works in West Africa. I've been in contact with her with that on actual animal preserves. She did have what they called a mini longhorn in Poolesville for many years, right across the street from us. Housed there, she actually walked it in one of the Poolesville Day parades. Also, Poolesville was the first city in Montgomery County to host the agricultural fair. Just, and our goal is to try to bring some of this back, some of the animals back. There are not very many programs locally. The closest farm she could get to even help is about 45, 50 minutes away. Mr. Moxley, he does AI insemination. He's a great guy. He's willing to always come down here. He's also president of NETLA. So they are within our access, again, 45 minutes, but on a daily basis for her to learn. She's learned how to show other people's animals, which is really difficult in its sense because you don't know the animal. But now she needs to learn the responsibility behind taking care of the animal and really being able to connect with it, because the next stages as she gets older is not only just being able to walk out there, but actually to train it herself. And that's a step we're at, and we're hoping to get your help to get her through this process.
All right, thank you so much. Questions from the board?
Yeah, thank you. That was great. And nice job presenting. The question I have is not so much for you all, but for you and Wade Niles. First of all, what's staff recommendation on this?
So,
Did you already say that? If I
yeah,
missed that?
no, that's okay. So staff recommendation is that the planning commission give a recommendation to the planning commission, or to the Board of Zoning Appeals, with the 2 conditions that we laid out. 1, nutrient management plan, and then 2, that there be the maximum as provided by the code, and we discussed 3 based on Kathy Mims' analysis.
Yeah, and I understand that you want 5 ideally, or up to 5, but like if Kathy Mims has 3.
Well, again, I haven't met with Kathy Mims.
Yeah.
To walk the property, so I would be willing to walk it with her before we say, hey, I'm max on numbers, because the problem would be it is a herd animal. So if I'm saying 3, it's going to be really hard for me to get that animal comfortable if we want to have 1 moving out for meat. That's why I was suggesting 5, because a meat would only be there for 9 months.
Yeah.
So that's a moving piece that would come in and come out, but a maximum of 3 really limits if I'm going to be able to do that.
I would want to hear from Kathy Mim before I was totally on board with 5, just because you know, obviously the water is very important and we're trying to take care of the water. And if she says that more than, she implies, it sounds like to me, that more than 3 could possibly have a negative impact. But, you know, maybe she'll walk the property and say, oh, no, it's fine, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I don't know how, because we haven't walked it. All I gave was a little sketch.
Yeah.
We also have the drainage pond, and we did drainage all around our property to bring the water to that area. And she may not be aware, but yeah, whatever, I know her well, I know she's the expert, so.
Yeah. Okay.
On page 33 of our packet, you provide a parcel. And in red, is that the area that is being mapped out for use? It's a little bit confusing as what area is planning to be dedicated to livestock?
So it's essentially our backyard. Okay, our house is here, this is our shop, these are our retention ponds. The barn, so this is our shed we have back behind the house. The barn is gonna go back behind here. We're gonna have field that goes all the way to the side, behind our shop here, and field that goes all the way around the back of our house and to the side, not to the front. So you won't be able to see anything from the very front of our house, but going to the side. Yeah, there you can see it's outlined. That wouldn't all happen at first, and that's why I'm saying maybe we need to meet to walk the property, because it's expansive enough. With only one, and especially the baby, we would only need a very small portion around that at first.
How many
Sorry,
acres?
Jamie couldn't be here.
No, that's okay. How many acres approximately is in that red section? Do we know?
We would have to look at the exact measurements of it, because this was just rough. But if you were saying that you thought it was bigger than an acre, how big do you think that it is?
2 to 3 inches.
Oh.
I mean, we can measure it and
Yeah.
get distinct. Or again, I'd be happy, again,
Mhm.
I didn't talk to Kathleen come out, so
Mhm.
we could all go over that.
Mhm.
But of course, we want to be responsible about it.
Were you going to say something, Wade? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, definitely the applicant needs to bring in the dimensions of that, what that would be.
All right.
I should have done this sooner, but I wasn't sure. I can map this real quick. Any other questions?
I don't have any other questions now.
My only comment would be, I kind of concur where Martin was going, so has a BZA meeting been scheduled for this yet?
Not yet. So we had
Then I
some.
recommend kicking this back and having you go back and rework this with town staff before because otherwise we're going to put a restriction on it tonight that you're not going to like.
Okay, I just request if we do that, if we can do it on a rush, because this animal is supposed to be donated in early June. We've got to build a barn and fence and get through the whole process, so, yeah, but definitely. So, because I assume this board only meets once a month, right?
Correct.
That would be putting us into March, then April to go with BZA, which means we wouldn't have anything ready until May.
So it would, depending on when the BZA gets scheduled, and we can talk about that. But because as long, for the BZA, there is 2 weeks that have to be advertised for it. But that can happen at the same time. This can be advertised as well. So there's various
Ways to do it. Got it.
ways of doing it, but we can look at that. And then see how the schedule works out. But we can have that conversation as well. But the plan then would be to have you come back for the next month of this body.
Just one last question I could think of, Julie. The numbers that you're talking about, 5, would that include, sheep or goats?
Yeah, 5 animals total, just depending on what the diversity, how, it depends on the animal too. I don't have this animal yet, so I don't know what its personality is gonna be. It's much like a dog and it's just a lot bigger. And you see what the personality is and what the best fit is gonna be.
Okay.
Our goal, it depends on how much she gets into it now too. If we may have 2 Longhorn and then we're just switching out our food, which we would use 1 a year. So, raise one, slaughter one, start raising the next would be. So it'd be a constant rotating thing. A lot of the people that we also show with in Montgomery County, and they come through Poolesville every year, actually, and stay at my house with me. So, I also don't want it to be hard and say, she's driving the trailer for me, because right now we don't have a trailer, so we have to foot the bill. Unlike 4-H, we're not able to raise money for like the fencing, the barns, we're having to foot all of that. So we don't have a trailer, so she's gonna be carrying, but it might be a situation where she's bringing my animal back overnight, gonna keep her 2 in my barn until she leaves, and take it the next morning. So I just wanna make sure we're not gonna run into it too big of a hassle if I say, hey, there's 5 here for 2 nights. But I don't think with the space, it should be a problem.
When you say slaughter, do you mean on premises? Will you do it yourselves, or you take them somewhere? Okay, just making sure there wasn't some other, like,
Would not do it.
some other thing there.
I have not become that country. You'll ever get that country.
Someday.
So, any other comments from the board before I?
I'm good. Thank you
that?
very much.
So I come from cattle farmers. I was born and raised in Oklahoma, and we raise cattle. And so this is of interest to me because I love that, and I think this is such a great thing for you to do. My primary concerns are that cattle today say that a single cow and a calf require between 1.5 and 2.5 acres. And I just pulled USDA's soil survey site in order to map what you've provided us, and it's less than 2 acres. And so the idea of putting 5 cattle in a 2-acre area where the minimums are around 1 to 1.5 is very concerning. So regardless of where we land on this, I do think that the idea of having more than 2, maybe 3, depending on what your survey actually comes back as, is a struggle for me personally. Of course, there are 4 other people on this board, but I do think that the size of your property is a limitation on how big and how much you can do. Those are my own personal thoughts. But I do want to continue to encourage you because, like I said, near and dear to my heart. So anything else from town on this? I think the general consensus is we will wait and push this to March meeting.
Next month? Okay, do you have anything else to add, Wade? Or is that good? Okay. Then we'll follow up then on the scheduling and how we want to address that as well.
And I have asked about the 1 to 1.5 acre per head. And they said that it is recommended, especially if you're just field feeding, but we're going to be giving grain, of course, and, and moving them around. So, but yeah, I completely understand. And
Yeah, it's a concern. And also, if there's any chance that we can have that nutrition plan.
Yeah, so we can
place.
send you, I found a link about what the Department of Agriculture has. I can send that to you and
Nutrient,
you
not
can see what
nutrition.
it
Sorry.
is.
Nutrient plan.
Yes.
I know the
yeah,
difference.
that should be that.
It's been a long day.
You go to Montgomery County.
Yeah, exactly.
Their facility off of Lancaster Mill Road.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for your time and for coming, and
Thank you.
we will move on to the next item, which is water and wastewater allocation request for the Bricken property. And I thought I saw someone here for that. Welcome, sir. Does town want to go ahead and give us their
Yes.
comments on this to start us?
So the applicant, Frank Jameson, requests water and wastewater allocation for the Bricken property. This development includes 65 homes, and based on the town, the total allocation, based on the town's guidelines, the total allocation would be 325 gallons per day per house, or 21,125 gallons per day. Further, the applicant has proposed covering costs of installing a PFAS filtration system on the well 4 and 14 well house. And then this is the staff analysis. At the January 10th, 2024 meeting, the Planning Commission discussed the water and wastewater capacity reports. During that discussion, the Planning Commission recommended to the commissioners that they withhold further allocations due to PFAS issues affecting the water system. The issues related to PFAS are not so much a capacity problem, but an operational problem, especially with wells 4 and 14 being offline and well 2 currently only operational during the warmer months. Further, town staff is waiting for the state to give us feedback on a water management capacity plan that could further detail the actions the town needs to take to make the water system as resilient as possible. This means allocating water or wastewater is not recommended until well 2 is complete and we have a favorable report from MDE on the water capacity management plan. Once those two previous conditions are met, wells 4 and 14 would have to be online prior to final approvals and the issuance of building permits. If they want to proffer funds for the completion of the well project, it would most likely expedite the process of their development. Currently, we are several years out from receiving state funds to complete well 4 and 14. So that's the staff's analysis. Are there any questions?
What are we deciding tonight? What's the?
So essentially, the discussion with this is whether to discuss the water and wastewater allocation, how you'd like to proceed potentially with it. Wade, did you want to say something specific to that?
No. I think, I'm not sure what Frank really wants to propose, but we should hear what he has in mind. And just take a look at it and see how it fits into our program.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I'm Frank Jameson, owner of this property, Bricken Property. I'm requesting the removal of item 5 in the letter from Clark Azar dated September 8th, 2023, signed by John Strong, the town engineer. It states in whole, we recommended, prior to processing the plats for the subdivision, that adequate sewer and water services are available. I received a letter September 14, 2023 from the town of Poolesville stating that the town of Poolesville Planning Commission gave conditional approval of the Bricken subdivision plan stating these conditions include the items listed in John Strong's letter from September 8, 2023. Excuse me. On December 11, 2024, at the planning board meeting, the applicant requested an extension of the September 13, 2023 approved preliminary plan, and said plan was extended by the majority vote of the Planning Commission on that day. On January 8, 2025, the town published their annual water capacity report showing net available water capacity of 32,850 gallons per day. In addition, the town also received on the same day the annual wastewater capacity report indicating a net available wastewater capacity of 165,850 gallons per day. These figures represent the net available water and sewer capacity after all 182 single-family homes accounted for in the water and sewer capacity reports. Both reports indicate adequate water and sewer capacity is available to water and sewer the Bricken preliminary plan approved subdivision, and leaving capacity for another 101 houses, 32,850 gallons per day divided by 325 equals 101. 325 gallons per day is what is recommended by the town of Poolesville. And sewer capacity for 510 homes, 165,850 gallons per day divided by 325 equals 510. I came up with the connection fees for the remaining 182 single-family homes is approximately $2,114,000 with the Willard and Petrella tract at $10,000 per unit for a connection fee. The town will receive funds eventually from a class action suit against Dow Chemical in either a 6 or 7-digit number. The town has submitted a request for grant funds to the U.S. EPA for $5 million. Estimated cost to remediate $4.5 million. With well 4 and 14 currently offline due to PFAS, we may be willing to enter a memorandum of understanding to advance funds to the town for the construction of a building that would be used to store the filters and equipment and the plumbing to wells 4 and 14 to get them back online. And that's pretty much it, what I had to say. I didn't quite get everything that you said initially, Niles. It was,
Certainly. Basically, what we said similar things. My comments were basically just about, we're waiting on the water management capacity plan, which we've discussed previously. And then also the current conditions of well 2, which we're currently working on and have allocated funds from the state for, to build a building to make that a full-time facility for PFAS remediation. And then just the discussion that of well 4 and 14, what we are waiting on in terms of getting that building, the funds to get a building to that and to put the filters on that building. So you discussed that as well.
so in my world, 4 and 14, which are currently offline, that have a high level of PFAS, could be easily taken care of by this applicant moving forward, advancing funds to the town to build that building, get the filtering system in place, and get the plumbing in place. Those 2 wells are offline currently. And this is, to me, would be a very reasonable consideration to have those 2 wells put back online. It would decrease the stress on the rest of the wells throughout the town. It's a balancing act, I know that. But my opinion is that you should move forward so that we can sit down and work out a deal. I am in that business, you know.
You're so convincing. So I just want to back up. We're talking about September, our meeting, September 13th, 2023, was when we discussed this, and you were referencing the preliminary plan letter that was sent September 8th, 2023, that was from...
That was from Mr. Strong.
Yes, from Mr. Strong, which had the
Mr.
5 recommendations.
Yes.
Just making sure that I have my notes too, sir.
Yeah, yeah.
All
If
right.
you don't, I'll give you a copy.
No, I have all my notes.
All right.
We're good.
I
All
knew
right, I
you
want to make
would.
sure I'm following
I
up.
knew you would, so.
All right. So the request is that we provide allocation based on returns for, is that
So-
my understanding?
So essentially, the discussion, I'd say that the discussion is to consider potential allocation with the conditions of potential funds or things like that. This is sort of more, not a definitive thing, but more discussion about these ideas.
Sure.
That's how I would say it.
Okay.
What would you want to say, Wade?
He said the advance of funds. What does that mean?
Just what it means. I'll advance the funds, and as you get these impact fees paid, or, I'm sorry, connection fees paid back, you would pay us back.
Pay you back. Gotcha. Okay. This wasn't clear.
Yeah.
What I suspected, but I wasn't clear.
That's, okay.
So is the, I just want to clarify, so is the intent of that to cover the cost of the building, or to cover the cost of the building and the, everything required to completely remediate the water? I was unclear on that.
I've asked for, and John's been working on it, and he and Wade have been in discussion about what is it that is necessary to get 4 and 14 up and running. My understanding of it is that not only do you need the building, you need the filtering equipment and the plumbing associated there too. That's, am I wrong in that?
Right. And do we have a, based on what we've done to date with PFAS remediation, do we have a ballpark on the amount for that? A ballpark?
We're in discussions with staff.
Okay.
So we have a bigger plan.
Yeah.
And the bigger plan is to tie different wells together. And so trying to get well 14 and 4 online, about 600 grand probably if you just do those 2. But when you don't swap out the aromatic tanks and the different well heads, and then when you bring well 12 down to tie it in like the overall plan is, then all that has to be redone. So it's not just as easy as, okay, here's X, Y, and Z, you pay for this, and then we'll pay you back. And I think the bigger picture is, we have the report that right now we're working with MDE as far as what Pat Hammond produces, says we do not have enough water to allocate anymore. Matter of fact, his report stated that perhaps we do not have enough water for the growth that's going to be happening now because of climate change in 2030, 2040. And so what should we do to that? Well, the results are you go ahead and you have to drill other wells. We have a watershed that has a theoretical supply of water in it still, or you do easements outside of the town and you bring more of a water supply online. All of these things are up in the air with the MDE, Pat Hammond report, and then Kathy Mim also, she's working up some stuff for this report also. So a lot of things in the air right now that to make this determination whether you could just give allocation right now.
I've lived here all my life. I've heard that damn argument my whole life. We don't have any water.
And I remember when I first moved here, there was water moratoriums every year.
There was. And we now have water, don't we? We don't have a moratorium.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
we're not carrying the redundancy
Yeah.
that we had in place at the time. That's something we need to address and make sure that it's addressed appropriately.
I'm just stating a
And
fact that I've heard this my whole life. Doesn't mean that Mr. Hammond is right or wrong. Just means that I've heard that the sky is falling before. Okay? And you can't build new schools and have the type of projects that are contemplated by the town and not have a population to support it. That is the truth. So give me my allocation, I'll start building, and everybody be happy.
Do we have a timeline or idea when MDE will give us feedback?
So we submitted it, I want to say it was October, that we submitted the information to MDE. The last we heard was the beginning part of this year that we would get feedback. We have not yet gotten that feedback. So it could be a few months from now. It could be, in a matter of weeks. It all depends on what their process is, which we are not privy to.
Yes. So part of the issue is they are also reviewing with their scientist the Hammond report that discusses climate change and takes into account the Potomac River Basin numbers and everything that's been released, within the last couple of years, updating about climate change. So that's kind of the wrench in the ointment right now.
I'd like to make a comment. As far as I understand what the town is doing, and as far as the PFAS mitigation is, we're kind of ahead of the curve, if you like, versus other communities. So there's a little bit of risk here in that if we're undertaking this to be the first of these that we're doing, we're going to be, there's a learning process, right? And so there's an advantage to doing that, but also a risk that we might learn some things that, we haven't done it correctly. So we do have to be mindful of the risks that are involved in doing it under maybe a more stressful timeline and conditions than we're not used to usually doing projects. That'd be my comment. And we're also in an era of changing regulations. So we just have to keep our eyes on that as well, because we're working to a standard presently, but those standards could change.
Just as a point of clarification a little bit. So we currently have 2 filter systems on wells 2 and wells 3. And in that process, we have learned things. So we've learned about how much time it takes to say have wells offline while we are changing them out. So we've gone through that process and learned, okay, it takes about 3 days to go through that process. So things like that I think just speak to what we are doing now in the learning process.
Okay.
And I'll point out too, I assume just because if there were hypothetically speaking a change on the federal level in terms of minimum or maximum parts per trillion PFAS, doesn't mean that we would necessarily adopt that. In other words, if the federal government passed some lax law that you could put a ton of PFAS in, doesn't mean Poolesville wouldn't keep the previous more stringent standard to try to keep our residents safe. I mean, that would be a discussion for the commissioners, I guess.
Right.
I don't see that happening. It's a World Health Organization, it's way above just, even the federal government, EPA.
Thank you, Wade.
So regardless of any of that, I think the bottom line, what this comes down to is we're looking at a fundamental change to the water system in town that no longer is the old school distributed water system as a more, and I'll loosely call it a centralized integrated system. That is the fundamental engineering problem that I see, that if we can't really do anything, it's not worth doing anything until that plan is finalized, because, as we mentioned earlier, we might just have to turn around and redo it again. Finalizing that plan for what the new integrated water system would look like is also contingent on the final MDE report and recommendations, correct?
I would say so.
Okay, so I like what Mr. James is proposing, because even once we have a plan in place, the actual funding of it, especially if we're waiting on federal funds, could take a long time. So in my mind, once we have the MDE information back, and that lets us hopefully then finalize our plan for what an integrated water system would look like, then I believe we could work with possibly Mr. Jameson on how to fund part of that in a more rapid fashion. But I don't think that's worth happening. It can really happen until we have those other two things, the MD report and the final plan for what the final water system is going to look like, in place. So it's kind of in between. It's not waiting 4 or 5 years for a final full approval, but it's funds. But it's more waiting on those two things, which hopefully will be in a relative short term, on a relative scale of things, and then possibly we can revisit this conversation and Mr. Jameson's proper idea to help jumpstart wells 4 and 14. Does that make sense from a technical logistical standpoint? Am I forgetting any points?
Yes, I think you need to know where you're going to have to go.
Yeah. And that's really based on those two things, one, the MD report and then what the integrated water system plan would look like. So that's kind of how I'm envisioning it, regardless of what other things might change theoretically in the future that's out of our consideration. It's more of what we know now and in the short term that we're waiting for.
So then tonight, we're not making any decisions, is that right? Sorry.
We're going to call someone to fix your mic. That's the decision.
It's not good.
So I'm looking at our water capacity report that we received that's dated January 8th of this year. And I just want to back up because the numbers that you gave were from the report that we received in December of 2023, correct?
No, the numbers I just gave you were from January 8th.
They were from this
year.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were moving fast. I was trying to keep up and look. Okay, so I just want to make sure that we were both on the same report. But I am not sure, under the current plan and the allocations for what is remaining, there are 19,710 gallons, which equates to 60 homes under the 60% capacity to be in the downtown target investment zone. And the 10% is essentially only 10 homes outside of the targeted area, with the remaining approximately 10,000 gallons per day for capacity and town use. The discussion that we had in January, which I would like to remind everyone, was that these percentages have been used for a very long time, but now that we are down to the final remaining capacity availability, we were going to discuss and reallocate those appropriately and no longer use percentages, but use hard numbers. This is allocated for town capacity. This is how many homes that we are allocating within the downtown target investment zone and other outside residential lots. And given that information and these limited numbers, I think that it would behoove this board to actually sit down and come up and vote on those numbers prior to giving allocation to anyone, regardless of who or where they are. Thoughts?
So what you're saying, I don't follow all your discussions because I wasn't here. But even though I got an approved preliminary plan that had a condition in there about adequate water and sewer capacity, and because of the PFAS thing, you're now going to change the numbers to a point that I might not have any allocation at all, but I have an approved plan on a piece of property that is zoned for residential development that meets the criteria of your residential development. Am I reading you right on that?
I think.
That I'm going to get a black ball?
No, sir. I remember very well when we had this meeting that the discussion came before the board, and it was at your own risk to proceed with that because we could not guarantee allocation until we determined whether we were going to be able to take care of the PFAS issue. You had another gentleman with you at the time. I can't remember the gentleman's name. But there was discussion about, what particulars of that discussion? But no, it was very clear that this was a risk on your part to proceed without
But
full allocation.
what you're saying now is you're going to change the line here.
No, there's not,
My risk, I understood at the time.
was that there would be
But if we're going to be
adequate water.
changing the criteria now, I've got a report that has to be coming back from the Maryland Department of Environment to give you some more guidance. And quite frankly, I don't know if a strong number, if a percentage works for my advantage or not, to be honest with you. I don't know. Than a hard number.
According to the percentage, there are 10 homes available.
Then why did you approve my plan?
The preliminary approval was based on numbers back then. I'm not sure I could pull the water report, but based on numbers back then and the percentages, I think they made sense. But the line has been moving, has it not?
Well, so the other thing to mention is that because of PFAS and things like that, at that
PFAS
point.
changed things.
And also that we had not, the choice of the planning commission was at that time not to try to revise these allocations. Because we didn't know where we were. So therefore, whatever discussion you make now about the, how to allocate, or whether it's a hard number or percentage, or how you work that out, it was about the discussion now. That was the way that I understood it flowing from that.
That's correct, because we pushed it down. Amanda Leiter wanted hard numbers back in 2023, in December. And PFAS became an issue, and we decided not to make any decisions until the PFAS was remedied. So this has always been, or at least for the past 2 years, has been an issue of PFAS.
PFAS might take that much water available
Right.
down to that much, depending on what we can and can't mitigate and what the laws came back as. We were waiting for the law, the federal and then down to the MDE to come back.
So Wade, what are our options here? What are we looking at?
Well, I mean, you've laid it all out there. I mean, he does have a preliminary plan conditioned upon getting allocation. And it is, as you said, at the risk of an applicant to proceed through the process to the point where he's at a stop now because he cannot move forward until he gets allocation. And we have a policy that the Planning Commission has adopted not to give allocation until we have corrected the PFAS issue and gotten the wells that are offline back online. So I think we are at a stalemate right now. As far as moving forward, we can't.
I see it as the same.
Yep. Well, as I have mentioned, we're willing to sit down and work with the town to get 4 and 14 online. And you have other things that might.
Right, and what I was saying earlier, coming back circle is, once we have two big things answered, one, the MDE report back, and two, seeing what that does to our plan for an integrated water system in town, which hopefully we'll get those answers fairly soon. Then again, it's out of our control because we're waiting on the state. Then we could possibly have a conversation about how to jumpstart that process with 4 and 14 as part of the integrated plan, based on working with you. But unfortunately, we're stuck waiting on MDE, because that's the, I guess, the most immediate sticking point.
Right, but this also doesn't change our permanent amount of 650,000 gallons per day.
Right.
That's still a hard cap.
Right, because assuming nothing else weird happens with PFAS.
Heard.
So we answered all your questions, Mr. Jameson?
Well, the last thing that I want to mention, which is not really related to my situation, but you have new subdivisions being built. Are you going to tell the new people who buy those houses that they have a high level of PFAS in their water?
They don't have a
They
high level of
don't.
PFAS in their water.
What we, Wade, I asked this question with you. You and I had this conversation, the three of us, at least 8 or 9 months ago. Town has the ability to stop those tractors moving at any point.
Right.
And I made it very clear in a meeting at least 8 or 9 months ago, that could happen, depending on what happens with water allocation, or not the water allocation, with what we find from our water availability and the PFAS concerns. So we have the ability, I hope we don't have to, but we can always stop the development. And those developers all know that, and it was made very clear to all of them over decades as part of town's water allocation and approval process.
I'd like to jump in here real quick and address what Frank had asked there. We do not have high levels of PFAS in our drinking water. We had 2 wells, actually 3 wells, that did have it. Well 4, it's offline. Well 2 and 3 had 25 to 36 parts per trillion. Those both were taken offline immediately. EPA has a threshold of a health advisory risk once it goes over 13 parts per trillion. All our other wells that do have it are just barely above the 4 parts per trillion. They're like 5 or 6. So when it goes into the blended system, it's not a health condition. So they are just barely over what the limit is. And EPA has given us till 2029 to get that corrected.
But it was a 2-part answer. So Wade, yes, he's right on that. But my point is, we always have the ability to stop development beyond even the allocation phase if there's a critical water issue. And we've discussed that or brought that up, and this is at least now the 3rd time, I think, that I've brought that up in the last 12 months. So it's, any developer that's out there even moving dirt needs to have that, be aware that it's a possibility. And I think the commissioners would be willing to cross that threshold and pull that trigger if need be.
Well, I know I'm not going to get anything tonight, and that's okay.
It's always nice to have you come in and talk to us.
I love seeing you all.
I know you do. Mutual.
I do. But what Wade just said might confuse people. We said we don't have a high level of PFAS in our water. So a person like me will say, well, if that be the case.
But that's through mitigation.
Yeah.
That's not saying that the water coming out of the ground does not have PFAS or a high level
I
of
would
PFAS.
strongly recommend.
Let's be
that
clear
the
that there
town-
is multiple mitigation techniques happening here. There are wells offline. There are 2 wells being filtered. There is not a PFAS issue because the town is proactive in making sure that there is not a PFAS issue when it gets to your tap. When it comes out of the ground, that's not the same.
I would make a suggestion to you all. You can do with it what you want. I am in the real estate business, and when in doubt, disclose. You may want to have some kind of acknowledgement in any of the contracts that are signed by people moving into this town, acknowledging that there may be a high level of PFAS in their water. Because if you don't, and I'm not a lawyer and I'm not practicing law, but you might set you all up for a class action suit by somebody. So I would strongly recommend that you get in touch with the people building the houses in the town. Say, add a paragraph, get your lawyers to draw a paragraph, and it can be all-inclusive. May have high levels of radon, may have high levels of PFAS, may this, may that. But if you don't, somebody might see an opportunity. Do with it what you want, all right?
Thank you
But
so much.
I went from my career having a 2-page contract to a 30-page contract that covers everything from soup to nuts. So I love Poolesville. It's a nice town. I like making money here. I don't want to see you all get into trouble.
I appreciate the CYA advice, so
Okay, thank you.
you have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Is that it? Anything else? Can I go home now?
You can save the
Thank you.
rest of the
It
meeting.
was good, it was good to get that laid out to the planning commission, your thoughts. So when we do move forward, at least it's out in the open what we're looking at.
Yeah, I want to
We did
work
do-
with the town, not be worked over by the town.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Jameson.
So it looks like we have no old business, but I want to take a moment just to discuss that next meeting, we will bring Coleman's back, I believe. We will
Yep.
also discuss parking, and is there anything else on the foreseeable docket?
Yeah, so
Oh,
we
yeah.
should by that point have the renderings, and so we can discuss a little bit more about the details of the plan, of the cultural arts district and how that might work out and things like that. But that was according to John.
I would encourage the commissioners to take time to put your thoughts into the Excel files so we can have a good, productive discussion on parking.
All right. That it? Make a motion, we adjourn?
Second?
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.